Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. We are doing a GlobalMindED series, which I'm very excited about. There's a conference coming up June 9th through the 11th, so be sure to check out globalminded.org to sign up for that. And during this entire series, I have been honored to have with me Rocio Perez. She's the Director of Leadership for GlobalMindED. How are you, Rocio?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about today's show.
Yes, definitely.
And getting to hear some more tips from amazing industry experts that can help us change the world.
Oh.
And as you know, GlobalMindED is closing the equity gap through education, entrepreneurship, and employment. We will be having this conference. We're really excited about that.
Yeah.
This is our 4th annual conference.
Okay.
From June 9th through the 11th, we will have a number of pre-conferences, and you can definitely visit us at www.globalminded.org to look at the entire conference programming.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about why it's important to look at diversity issues and why it's important to look at first gen and how does that relate to society, our economy, individuals, and whatnot throughout the entire segment. I'll share a little bit about myself, Alex, as a first-generation student, individual who was completely lost and alone. First of all, I was knocking on the university's doors when I was 15 years old. And I was told that I couldn't go to school, and I was such a little rebellious kid. This is my dream. I'm like, this is my dream. I wanted to become a teacher at the time I was 5, and at 15, I thought that was going to become a reality instantaneously. I took my AccuPlacer, grabbed it, took it over to the registration office. It didn't work that way. Unfortunately, I found out that I had to be 16, and also that my parents needed to sign, which they were nowhere in the world, anywhere I can see them.
Yeah.
I had connected with them for over 3.5 years at that time. I ended up getting emancipated and going into college at the time that I was 17. And finding myself in college lost and alone and figuring out, how does this work? I don't know. I didn't know anyone in my entire family who had been at college. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I was completely lost. There was times, Alex, that the teacher would be discussing certain topics that I should have, could have, would have learned in high school had I completed my schooling, that I would need to go home at night and research. I would go to the library and figure out what was it that they were talking about. I made mental notes, all types of notes.
Yeah.
And in time, I also started leading the way a couple of years later, taking students along the way and saying, okay, we may not know this, and that's okay. Let me take you by the hand. Let's go figure it out. Let's talk to the dean of academic affairs or whatever, whoever it was, and just continue to lead the way. I never took no for an answer. What does life look like? And when we were talking off the air just a moment ago about some of the skills in adversity, and we're going to hear more about that in just a moment from Jeff and Melissa. What are some of those skills that are amazing where an individual who has been first gen or who has been through adversity, how can they adapt inside of a work setting once they have the soft skills, once they have the networks, the professional networks, the resources that they need to be successful, and how do those adversities actually become the company's greatest assets? So with that being said, I'd love to introduce, we have Melissa and Jeff, and I'd love to hear from your perspective. Now, I hear neurodiversity. I'm absolutely fascinated by the word in and of itself. And what does that mean? I'd like to hear more about your work as well as what you're doing with the pre-conference and everything along with that. So take us away.
Absolutely. So first of all, it's a real privilege to be here today and to share in this conversation and talk a little bit about our talent development ecosystem, the state of Colorado, because one thing that we're trying to do is create pathways forward for everybody. And individuals clearly experience systemic barriers of different types throughout their childhood and into their adolescence. And sometimes those barriers can really hold them back from ever launching forward. But what we know and what the evidence is starting to tell us, and it's coming back from industry, we have some landmark studies that are coming out, that diversity matters, that having this multitude of perspectives at the table really drives innovation. We have a new presentation on my team when we go out and evangelize to businesses, talking about how inclusion drives innovation. 321 of the top 500 companies of the Fortune 500s are saying right now that diversity is driving their innovation. It's the primary fuel for their innovation motor right now. And neurodiversity being a kind of a subset of that is really impactful, because these individuals are looking at problems from a different perspective. And that's where the alignment between the work that we do and connecting the talent that we have that's sometimes on the sidelines and they haven't developed the right skills, and connecting that with the demand that we have in the state with all of these great jobs that we have in our advanced industries, that's where the alignment with GlobalMindED comes into play. Because GlobalMindED provides a platform that, as part of a broader ecosystem, is going to allow individuals to overcome some of these obstacles, to get connected and grow their networks, and to allow the systems to come together and start to align. And I think that's we're at a really exciting place right now. And I can talk more, and we will talk more about each of those areas. But our premise today fundamentally is that we have basically three issues when we think about success through school for individuals with barriers and success ultimately into the workforce. We have the numbers in Colorado right now to fill so many of our job openings that are being unfilled, but we have a utilization and an equity gap. And number two, we feel, and Melissa and I strongly feel, and Melissa's brilliant in terms of the models that she's put together, that building employability skills and starting at a young age is going to help these individuals not just overcome their systemic barriers, but get onto these career pathways. And then third, we need to look at what those systemic barriers are out there in society, because when we move past barriers, we forge our character. We forge it in fire. And that's, I think, a discussion that we can definitely tease out. And I can give lots of examples, but I don't have time to talk about everything that we're doing at this date, but I can funnel it down to maybe one or two good examples.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you very much for inviting me to the conversation. Yeah. This is really fun. And I think we have a really unique perspective and timeline right now with technology, right, with the conversations, with GlobalMindED and the mission that we're looking at with the conference. And you know, you were talking about your pathway, and I think we all have our own pathways as first gens. I share a parallel path, not similar necessarily, but when we're looking at employability skills, as Jeff mentioned, right, they're more robust than what we are currently having the conversation around. And when we're talking about equity issues, and we're talking about everybody having different learning modalities, and how do people absorb information and retain information and learn these employability skills, we have a unique opportunity with technology to really bridge some of those gaps as well. So as we start to talk, when we are able to look at what we have more in common among all of our traditional however you cut the pie, whether it's gender or race or ability status, we have way more in common in terms of what's needed and bridging the gap between what industry says that they need and what we're producing from an education standpoint. And so those are some of the systemic gaps that I think will be really fun to talk about today.
And that's fantastic. And speaking of that, diversity, and speaking of individuals that we traditionally said disabilities, right? What are some of the greatest assets that an individual who is traditionally looked at as being at a disadvantage actually has?
Yeah, and I've had the pleasure of the last 6 years devoting my life in way more hours than I probably better admit on this program in terms of going out there.
It's called passion.
That's,
It's something that keeps you up at night,
it is.
Gets you excited every morning. Yep. That is true passion.
Because there are so many of these individuals who simply cannot take it for granted that getting to an appointment, getting to school, getting to a workplace, they have to start problem solving from the moment they get out of bed. They have to develop resilience. They have to develop determination and perseverance, because the world, and this starts with parents and providers, healthcare providers. I saw this when I was in medicine, going through my formative training years and doing research at Children's Hospital. We completely misjudged and underestimated the capabilities of so many of these young adults, especially who had developmental or learning disabilities. Well, we certainly weren't fostering motivation and encouragement and inspiration for what they could do. Instead, we were without intentionally doing it, setting ceilings. So these individuals break through these ceilings and they say, hey, listen, society's been telling me for a long time what I can't do. And so when they come into our program, the first thing we do is say, we need to scrub that whiteboard clean. We need to start over, and we need to write up on the top of that board, what can you do? Because we're going to talk a little bit about the things that have held you back, but we're going to talk a whole lot more about, as Melissa was saying, this whole range and body of skills that you have. We're going to level up your technical skills, but we're really going to bring out that resiliency, the determination, the perseverance, that enhanced problem-solving capacity. And I'm using exact words out of studies where companies are telling us these are the things they're seeing in the workplace that are elevating their business model. And we want this to start shining through in education as well, and to give educators, and we hope in the GlobalMindED pre-conference on ability status, we can tease out a roadmap a little bit and maybe focus around employability. But those are the things that they're bringing to the workforce. It is amazing to see somebody succeed in the workplace and to see employers rally around that individual. It raises the morale. And I'm talking raising the morale at a place like Google or Microsoft Redmond, where we have placed candidates, or Cable Labs, the premier invention shop for the telecom industry. Very tough place to get hired. We've had 2 neurodiverse individuals hired there. They've already filed patents.
Wow.
They couldn't buy the employment before we came on board and helped the employer understand there's all this value in these individuals.
And how wonderful it is, right, to come in and look at an individual from a whole perspective. Right. It is not a section of me that shows up and this is just the employable section. It is me as a whole, complete individual with everything. We talked about the skills. How does that impact? And please share with us, how does that impact from an individual in personal into the work field?
Right. So when we think about skills and we think about how people acquire skills, right? When we start defining what those skills are as a whole, you're looking at the technical skills, of course, and we think about those things in the traditional sense of an educational environment. And we think about those as cognitive skills, typically. When we're talking about the rest of the employability skills, we're really talking about those non-cognitive skills. So those skills like grit and determination and what people would characterize as motivation, but they're really behaviors and their skill sets when we start pulling the onion apart, right? When we start peeling back the layers and saying, what are these skill sets that make somebody truly employable? And they're in 3 different categories. They are certainly the technical skills and the education levels and those foundational skill sets that we traditionally see on a resume, right? Basic requirements for a job or an occupation. But some of the most important things are the soft skills and life skills. And there's a lot of interplay between the two when we're thinking about skill sets like showing up on time, or I'll have employers say, yes, but can you teach initiative? And so there are some really important components like a mentor and being able to see somebody exhibiting those skills, right? We learn by watching and seeing role models. That's a really key part. But there's also a way of breaking down those soft skills and those life skills to say, when you walk into a room, if you see a garbage can, even though it's not your job to empty it, empty it. When you go on break, right, don't leave 3 minutes early. Fulfill your shift and then go on break and send that text. So these types of skills can be looked at and we can characterize them almost like character traits, but they can actually be broken down into these skill sets and taught. And those are the skill sets that employers are absolutely crying for. They're saying, I want somebody who can show up on time, be a good team player, problem solve. And that hits, I think, what you're really talking about in terms of, you said it wasn't no, right? And I feel the same way. It was never no with me. It's just not yet. And when we're thinking about skills and skills development, people who have traditionally have to overcome challenges learn that grit. And once they learn that grit, when they get on a job site, they're traditionally the individuals that when they're struggling with something, they don't sit for 3 days and not ask somebody for help. They can have the skill set to go ask for help when it's appropriate, but then not be that one employee that takes 90% of the time and has to have their hand held. So typically those are the skills, they almost seem intangible, but they're not. They can actually be taught.
And they're so important. And I look at that as well from the perspective of what is the cost to a company, Alex, when we're sitting around the table, we're problem solving a problem, and an individual does not have that grit and does not have the courage, yet they have the solution.
Right.
And because they don't have the confidence, or because they didn't speak up, or because they were about to and they almost hummed,
Right.
and that went overlooked or overheard. And what happens to the progress of the company? It is a missed opportunity.
Right.
How many organizations are missing those opportunities because they're overlooking their talent? They're not investing time, energy, money, resources into their people, because at the end of the day, you can invest those particular skills, to me, are some of the most important skills that an individual can have. Because when everything is leveled out and you have all the time, energy, money, resources, education, the right team, is the right team prepared with the right skills?
Right.
And those are beyond the soft skills.
And I think really importantly, the mindset.
It is a mindset.
Right. So, and I think that that's what's so important about the GlobalMindED Conference, is really what we're trying to do is come together in conversation and hear everyone's voices. So it's really very similar to what we're advocating here, is to say, let's come together, because there are some foundational things that we all know. We have the research data. We know how to actually change the world and have that paradigm shift. It's how do we operationalize that? How do we execute to that? And I think that that's the unique opportunity that we have. We're really on this cutting edge where I think we have industry that's saying, yes, tell me what can I do and how can I come to the table? And we have government agencies that are doing just fantastic work, and we have nonprofits doing fantastic work. We have parents and families that are working to become resilient. It's a matter of connecting all of those dots and coming together and saying, okay, what's next? How do we take that next step? And I think that that's what is a really interesting conversation where we're at right now, is how do we operationalize that?
What inspires you most about your work, Jeff?
I'll tell you what inspires me most about my work. What gets me up early. My days usually start at least an hour before I'm, in the office or out in the community. And what keeps me there late, it's watching the individuals that I am helping succeed, watching them overcome obstacles, not take no for an answer. Together, as partners, we go and approach companies. Not every company is in the right frame of mind at that moment to look at a non-traditional candidate, somebody who might do the job different than traditionally they have seen it done. And therefore, that opportunity doesn't materialize. But these individuals are saying, okay, that was one company, let's go talk to 50 more. And that motivates the heck out of me, and it makes me work that much harder, on their behalf. And when they do get that opportunity and the company does make the hire, and then I'm able to support that match between the two, there's a magical element that takes place, and it is really incredibly inspiring. If I ever had the privilege to again be a psychiatrist, and neuropsychiatry was my foundational practice in medicine, I will do so with such an enhanced perspective about the role of employment in fostering self-esteem and identity and creative contribution, and that nobody, regardless of where they begin in life, whatever adversities they might be born with, a young lady with cerebral palsy and cystic fibrosis uses a wheelchair, all the time. We got her a job at a humane society doing data entry, and we all patted ourselves on the back and said, wow, you've got a data entry job now, and you might have, some semblance of a career pathway. She said, first of all, I don't want a job coach sit next to me every day. Second of all, I want to go to CU and do accounting. So she ended up at CU doing accounting. And that inspires me. And knowing that we helped her develop her employability skills. She had it intrinsically within her, but we gave her the structure. We gave her the guidance to develop those skills. Now she is on the verge of amazing things, and people aren't going to look at her and say, oh, wow, because of your disability, you have succeeded. They'll say, no, because you are so passionate and determined, you have succeeded. The disability was one piece of who you are, but look at all these other things that you bring to the table as a whole person. And
looking at the importance, this is very similar to having a coach develop an athlete.
Yes.
This is an individual developing an individual. And I'd see, even from a place of diversity coming and adversity, extreme adversity, where I come into the classroom or I come into a corporation and they can't see the solution. It's too much of a leap. I can literally come in and place the piece of the puzzle right there, and it's solved that fast. Because I see the world through a different lens. The solutions, I can rearrange a room in my head, and I can tell you before you even move one piece of paper whether it will work or not. And that is a huge skill that companies, once they understand how to develop their talent. Yes. And speaking of developing their talent, Melissa, what is the advice that you give companies in order for them to see the big picture?
Well, I think that companies are very interested in seeing the big picture. So I think a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, when I go into a company and they ask me, help us with our workforce, or we're having a difficult time with workforce, they're typically pretty open. It's just that they're in the business of doing their business, right? They're not in the business of talent development. So when you can create that structure for them, you can articulate to them the employability skills, and then you can talk to them around that workforce development, where you can talk to them about, you have an existing rock star, right? Every company has that young person, that rock star, right? And they are fantastic. So how do you invest in that individual, and how do you find out who their friends are, and how do you hire their friends, even if they're not they don't have necessarily the educational background yet, right? We're back to that not yet piece. So how do you take that entry-level person, how do you invest in their education as well, and then how do you move them up and promote them, and then hire another person within, so that what you're doing is you're investing in the whole person. And so as you start to invest in that whole person, the company is actually creating their own workforce development inside of their company. And so when you can put the puzzle pieces together like you've just indicated, I find 9 times out of 10 they're more than willing. When they see it, they go, got it, right? So some things like job sharing, some things like just shifting your shifts from 1 hour later, so that a single mother doesn't have to do before school and after school for her children, right? Maybe it's just an after school and she can do an after school program. So when you're able to sort of bridge the gap between this traditional economic development and this traditional human services, and you're looking at that whole person and their employability skills and the barriers to them being employable, you can bridge those gaps, and I find that employers are absolutely willing.
And I think that's one of the things that I find so inspiring to hear that employers are really excited to work with individuals and to invest in their talent, because I think that's one of the things that is most important. It is not the systems, it is the people who run the systems that will lead you to your success.
Right.
Yes.
And even greater levels of success.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, this is a fascinating conversation. Stay with us. We're going to come back with more. In the meantime, though, I really want you to check out globalminded.org. You can get your tickets to the conference, again, June 9th through the 11th. That is this summer, so we're hoping to get some students there as well. And with all students, we understand that financials aren't always up to date. So you can apply for scholarships at globalminded.org to get into this conference, which I think is probably the best part, in my opinion, is that you can apply for a scholarship to get there.
And there's so many different ways to plug in and attend this conference. You can attend the conference. You can attend also the UN Sustainable Dinner, which I would love for anyone to come in and just network, to be with the caliber of people that will be there, Alex, will be absolutely fantastic. So with that being said,
we will be right back. Stay with us here on Connect and Collaborate for our Global Minded series. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page in the meantime. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. We are having a fascinating conversation here. I have Rocio Perez. She is the Director of Leadership for Global Minded, and that's part of this Global Minded series that we're doing in preparation for the conference June 9th through the 11th. And again, sign up for that at globalminded.org. But Rocio, take it away. I know we got some good combo going.
Inspired. We had great conversation off the air, and I am just going to turn it right over to you, Jeff, because I am so on fire with what you were saying, and I can really relate to that. So please share your experience.
So what we were talking about is the advantages that individuals with neurodiversity, with ability status, can bring to the workplace. And though we're not going to maybe go into a deeper dive here today about the educational side of things, but these individuals have that same potential in the educational system. So I'm going to share an example of a young man recently who I helped to obtain an internship opportunity, which will lead to paid employment. But know in advance that this young man did not have opportunities to participate in STEM classes. This young man was not in any kind of advanced curricula going forward, in that the mindset was, well, let's just get you through school. Let's do our traditional special education programs. We'll support, and so on and so forth. But there was nothing going on that was really maximizing his talent cultivation at the educational level. But here's what is so amazing. So this young man is neurodiverse and looks at the world through a different lens. And I connected him with an IT company, a startup company, with a couple of senior level programmers. And these programmers were coming from enterprise industry, and they want to move in a different direction. And they think, hey, let's help some individuals for whom opportunities may not come as easily. So we set up an interview, and as can be the case sometimes for somebody who has neurodiversity, the competitive standard interview was a bit awkward. And we expected that going in, and so the young man did the very best that he could to answer questions and describe his skills and show examples of his work. But really, where the magic took place in this experience was when we were wrapping up and we were getting ready to leave, and we had decided that, yes, let's give him a chance to show his skills. Let's set aside that interview and let's give him a chance to show what he can do using a bridge called a paid internship. And we can fund those through the state of Colorado, and we've got lots of money to help opportunity youth and ability status youth and people that have had these systemic barriers to access employment through that route. But he pulled out a magazine, and he just wanted to show us all what he does for fun. This is what he does in his spare time on weekends. He solves ciphers. And ciphers, are basically matrices of all kinds of symbols and numbers, just random things that people over time, from ancient history up to the present, have created to embed codes. And if you solve the code, you're going to find treasure or something along those lines. But that's not why he's solving it, because he's doing it because it stimulates him mentally, and he likes to challenge. And as he flipped through that magazine, he pointed out to us all of these different patterns on every single page within all of these ciphers. Said every 26 letter is repeating. It's the letter A. And if you combine that with, these other two things that I'm seeing here, this one's pretty easy actually to solve and see what they were doing. And we just looked at each other slack-jawed thinking, you know what, I could look at this for the next year, and I'm not going to see it. But this stuff jumps out to him almost in a three-dimensional way in his mind. And the look on the face of the programmers was priceless. They knew then that we're not hiring somebody who's going to come in and blow us away with the social skills. And that might be a good thing, because he's going to put his head down and he's going to innovate. He's going to look at a data set. He's going to look at programming, and he's going to write new code. He's going to see things and patterns and go in different directions because his brain's wired differently. We'll teach him the social stuff. He's got neuroplasticity too. We'll teach him some employability skills. That's what our program is there to do. We're going to follow along. We're going to work with him to build his resilience and he's already got some grit, but we're going to even enhance that further. Nobody can teach that aptitude, though, to see patterns.
And to take a look at that, I look at it from an entrepreneurial perspective. That is true entrepreneurship, that innovation. in and of itself, coming from within the individual and bringing those skills, those resources
right,
that will leapfrog these companies above the rest.
And if I may, that's sort of the micro view, right? We have lots of stories like that, precisely like that. And when you've asked me offline, what can employers do to access, right? How do we make more of these stories in a really macro view? And when we talk to employers, I think really what we want employers to take away, and anybody who's hiring, is a two-pronged approach. It's to, rather than silo and think, I'm going to go here to get this type of a person, and I'm going to go to this organization to get this type of person. When we're talking about culture, let's look at culture as a broader term. So including the different age categories, including ability status, including different race and ethnicities. So when we're talking to employers, we want them to think outside the box and innovate themselves, not silo in their thinking. And so when you're thinking about breaking down workforce development with employers, and you talk about pipeline, right? How can you connect with the pipeline? The pipeline is your education system. And how do you recruit? You recruit from the labor force that we're talking about. And how do you recruit that non-traditional workforce as you're talking about that really large view of culture? And then the second piece of that, the way I think that employers can be even more innovative, is their social network. Right? They tend to think, in my opinion, in the workday. So who do I know? Who are my colleagues, or who can I go to? But if they were to really look within their own social network, right, they would have employees that may have a son or a daughter, right? Who is this individual that he just told the story about? And so when they can look within their own social network, the social networks are typically our systemic barriers as well. So they can overcome their own systemic barrier by just looking to their entire social network, and then the great government agencies and the community-based organizations, and they can look within all of those different places to get their non-traditional pipeline. And then one other little caveat to that is that once they find them, they recruit them, they show a competency based in terms of how they maybe interview them, what are then those things that they can do to onboard them as well? Right. So when you're looking at these various variety of cultures, how do you then, once you hire and onboard this individual, how do you make sure that they continue in the right fit and they continue to be a great part of your team?
Which is one of the most important things, because the support, the amount of time, energy, money, resources, support that must be invested, because there's an important investment into your people, is minimal in comparison to what individuals have to contribute.
Absolutely.
And when you understand that it's not just one time, this is your orientation and this is how we're onboarding you, yet there's a continuation of support, and just knowing that there's also a mind shift within the employer that must take place, that's important for it to be there, so that individuals can be successful, so that they can feel safe.
Right.
Especially if they feel awkward. They have so much to offer, and they may feel awkward from one point or another in their lives, and not contribute that piece of the puzzle that we're seeking. And how do we inspire them to do that?
Right.
Now we're talking about also pre-conference, Jeff. Tell us more about the pre-conference that you're doing through GlobalMindED.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we hope to do at GlobalMindED, and what I hope to do above all else, is start asking the right questions, because there are people who are so much smarter than I am, but who might be working more independently or more siloed, who can come together within a system of thought leaders, within a network of thought leaders that we hopefully will gather into the room, that can then collectively go to educational systems, collectively help to enhance the messaging to the workforce and to employers, that these individuals who are encountering systemic barriers, that these individuals need to be part of our labor force. They're in our labor pool, but they're just not being utilized right now, and we have these big gaps that are out there. So we want a lot of creative problem solving to take place around what's going well in our education system so far to cultivate our talent, to develop these skills, but where can we start to shift things? Where can we start to bake in this universal design learning around employability skills? How can we provide these internship or experiential learning opportunities for students so that they can level up not just with the technical skills that they're learning, but they can level up with their soft skills as well? And then how can we create adaptable classrooms? Because there's a body of evidence, and I'm not expert on that, but I want people who are expert to be able to voice an opinion on that. Parents can sometimes be very expert. No one knows their child and their child's learning preferences and abilities better than parents, so we want parents to be there. But there are all kinds of ways within the educational system to help these individuals with barriers to learn more effectively. And frankly, right now, individuals with learning disabilities, there is a stronger pipeline to the prison system than there is to lucrative jobs in our growing industries. Wow. 750,000 people in our prison systems across the country have learning disabilities. Between a quarter, and this is an underestimated number, all experts agree, but the reported number is 25% of all those who are incarcerated or in prisons and in jails have severe mental illness. Yeah. But they actually think that is higher, that we're still not doing a good enough job of diagnosing that. And so hopefully we'll also have some folks who will say, here's where we can intervene. Maybe preschool, kindergarten, we can begin the intervention. We can begin teaching social and emotional skill capacity at that point, so that what we see with kids who have severe emotional disorder, and also black boys, they're 3 times more likely to be expelled or suspended in early K through 12. And hopefully we can start intervening there. And sometimes these kids, have a learning disability. That's why the severe emotional disorder. They've been picked on, they've been bullied. It's a cover-up.
It's a cover-up. I speak in prisons, and I also advocate for children. And hearing that children are being expelled in kindergarten, how does that happen? Where have we gone as a society versus looking at how do we engage individuals in a different way versus putting them into a system? You must act, do, and be the way I expect you to be versus I accept you the way you are and allow me to understand you so that I can better engage and lead you.
We're definitely working on that in the education system. But if you think about it, when we first started our education system, it started in a time of the revolution, right?
Yes.
We have the bells that tell us exactly when we can get up out of our seats.
I was just in a school this morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Twice.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? We are on this militant, you have to stay seated, you have to listen. And we're not individuals like that anymore. We've come so far in society with technology that we need a new system set up. And a lot of schools are changing and heading in that direction.
Right. Well, and we know that the research bears out that those non-cognitive skills, those problem-solving skills, the emotional skills, the resiliency skills, actually demonstrate that those children that have those skill sets actually develop the cognitive skills and have higher academic achievement.
Yes.
So those are the precursor skills to actually learning the cognitive skills.
Yeah.
So.
And it's fascinating. Two conversations. One being with the prison systems, and that we have individuals who were highly talented and ended up in prison, right? And then we have individuals who are just absolutely wonderful at what they do. They excel, and we haven't seen that. Speaking of that, Melissa, what is your advice for employers that want to take the leap and want to hire individuals or look and invest in their talent? They're not quite ready at 100%. They want to take action. What would you recommend for them?
Sure. So I think that it's really important, again, to have that open mindset and really look within their social network and the ecosystem. So as Jeff was mentioning, there are a host of experts that many individuals can reach out to. So thinking outside that box and looking and actually reaching out to the Division of Vocational Rehab, reaching out to the CDLE, the workforce experts, because there are many programs that offer assistance and offer funding, and there's federal funding around custom fit for training dollars for existing workers. There's multiple ways to customize a pathway for all individuals. So what I would encourage employers to do is not think that there's just one pathway, that every individual coming through their door has an individual pathway, and there are resources out there for them. So reach out and actually look through their ecosystem of who surrounds them and what they have access to, and just start asking questions. What is it that you do, or how did you find that person? Or call Jeff and say, Jeff, I'm interested in engaging here. So there's lots of opportunity out there, and one call will lead to 5, which will lead to 25. And that's what I would encourage them to do, is actually do that one call. Or back to your question to Jeff, come visit the conference, the pre-conference. Have a voice. We want that entire ecosystem, not just the educators, or not just the subject matter experts. We want everybody, because everyone really truly is the expert when we're talking about that holistic person.
And we want industry to help steer that conversation as well, so that if they're in the room with educators, and they might be in the room with foundation funders who can help to bring technology innovations into the classroom, but also into the workplace. You know, how can they lead and guide some of these developments and paradigm shifts in the way we are preparing individuals to succeed vocationally. And I think of education really as where the pipeline begins. This is where we're learning that whole range of skill sets to be eventually successful in the workplace. But industry now more than ever needs to be the guide, because skills are evolving out there so quickly. The train to 2025 has already left the station. The Internet of Things is revolutionizing everything. It's going to revolutionize the way we walk across the street.
20,000 years of progress overnight.
20,000 years of absolutely.
Overnight.
Yes, but we're also going to see job contraction. So the state has been very forward thinking in terms of how are we going to prepare our workforce for the future of jobs, and hand in hand, how are we going to have a 2-gen model where we have generational poverty, and we have individuals, parents and children, who are trapped in this cycle and not leveling up their skills. How do we bake in employability skills to help them attain vocational and subsequently self-sustainability success? And then how do we reach out to these underutilized populations? How do we help employers, see the value and the opportunity there? And I think that's where, the anecdotal stories, we have an educational platform through the Division of Voc Rehab or other programs within labor and employment, where we can educate businesses on what are the common misconceptions and stereotypes. Melissa likes the word pigeonholed. And I think the pigeonholing starts at that early age, kindergarten. There's intrinsic bias among teachers who have the same race or ethnicity as a student. So black teachers are thinking, oh, well, that little black boy is acting out, because of A, B, or C. And maybe it's, the first little peek through of mental health challenges, or maybe there is a learning disability that's causing frustration in the classroom.
And I just want to be really clear, because I think we talk a lot about employers, and I think sometimes employers feel like the finger gets pointed at them, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the educational system feels the same way.
Yes.
We start pointing fingers at the educational system. And I think what the clear message is that it's not going to be one silver bullet. It's going to be a lot of little
And it's
babies.
the entire community.
It is.
coming
And so
together.
when you ask me the question around employers, I'm not suggesting that they solve their own problem. I'm suggesting that they open their arms,
Yep.
right? And it's not a push where they go out, and it's almost more like a pull to say, how do I get involved, and how do I, come to the conversation? Because when you come to the conversation, you will meet that next person that gives you that next idea. And so I think that we need to be really clear around, it's not one particular system, right, that's going to solve the problem. It really
right.
is this collaboration and this networking in the ecosystem that's going to solve the problem.
Absolutely. Education and industry and funders and foundations and individuals in workforce development.
Right.
If Melissa and I accomplish anything, it's building the architecture for these other individuals to utilize.
And I call that community resiliency, right? We talk about individual resiliency. We talk about family resiliency. I think that there's a community resiliency as well. And when we can continue to do these measures in both a micro assessment, right? We can customize to the individual and make sure that they have lots of opportunity, and we break down those systemic barriers. we also need to do the same thing all the way on the continuum to the community resiliency as well.
I just want to reiterate here, we're talking about the pre-conference, and that, again, will be Saturday, June 9th. That's when the pre-conferences are going to happen. And the particular one that you're running, Jeff, will be at Sheraton Downtown Denver Hotel. I just want our listeners to make sure that they sign up for that one. We are also having one here at the Colorado Business Roundtable as well. That one is focusing on our rural futures. So please, again, sign up at globalminded.org for the conference. But any other, you mentioned, Jeff, accessing employment through internships with Colorado money.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that something you'll be touching on, or can you give us a little more insight into that?
Absolutely. So that's part of the state strategic plan for linking the supply of talent that we have out there, including those populations that are underutilized, with the demand that we have. Again, we have forecasters and economists and workforce planners from the Governor's Workforce Council that are looking at not just the horizon we have here today, but that horizon that is shrinking. I mean, it's in the distance now, but it's coming closer and closer and closer. You know what the number one skill that's in demand right now in the state of Colorado above all others? Digital. The number one soft skill is communication. You want to succeed as we go forward. We want these underutilized populations to be successful. They need to be learning technology skills, but also they need to be learning social skills. If you have social skills and you have, technical skills that are non-routine technical skills, where there's a level of creativity, a level of problem solving, you're going to be well positioned to move into the future. We want our work-based learning experiences, or our internships, and the ways that we build bridges to employers, we want them to be able to develop those skills. We want to incorporate technology into those work-based learning opportunities, meaning, therefore, they might go to a community college and be leveling up their skills academically. At the same time, they're getting on-the-job training by the employer. Better yet, if we really want to build a pipeline, let's tap into this huge pool of money we have for registered apprenticeships.
Yeah.
And so without getting into too many details here today, that's a fantastic way for some of these growth industries, from engineering and healthcare and IT, to begin having talent not just for today, but also well into the future, and then help us to customize those demand-driven training programs so that they'll have the right skills in advance of when that wave hits us.
Let me give you a concrete example of one of those demand-driven training opportunities. So the Division of Vocational Rehab has what they call pre-employment transition services for youth with disabilities. And so the whole concept is that we provide 5 distinct services: career readiness, which is that employability skills training; work-based learning, where employers can absolutely plug in. They will receive, this pipeline of interns that have some of that career readiness training and that employability skills training. They have this transitional post-secondary transition services if they're interested in that. And then independent living skills. So there are these 5 distinct services that we're providing to these young people that give them the pathway that decrease those systemic barriers that employers can absolutely plug into right now, today. And that's a really concrete example of these demand-driven training opportunities.
And here's the beauty, and this is what the state wants. We want industry-recognized credentials to be available in high school before people graduate. We want an industry-recognized credential in the right hand and a high school diploma in the left hand. Not everybody's going off to a 4-year university. We want to boost their opportunities to enter the workforce and do meaningful work and find that on-ramp onto a lucrative career pathway as early as possible. And so employers are starting to help us guide some of these experiential opportunities beginning as early as 15 years old.
And when you work with young people where they can have self-determination, they can choose that career and that career exploration. It's spot on.
I agree.
Wonderful. This has been such a fascinating conversation. I am so inspired, and I'm looking forward to attending the pre-conference, learning more, and engaging with more like-minded individuals. It's so fascinating.
It is fascinating. I'm glad that this is happening again, June 9th through the 11th. Be sure to sign up at globalminded.org. And also be sure to check out this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast, and like and subscribe. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you all on today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.